Welcome to another Hockey Writers Podcast 2022-23 NHL season preview show. I'm your host, Kyle Knopp, joined by my co-host, Matthew Zator. And today we have Jacob Strozyk. I hope I pronounced that right. Jacob, I'm sorry.
Not even close.
Not even
Strozyk,
close.
But that's okay.
Strozyk. Jacob Strozyk. I should have asked before we started the recording. Jacob Strozyk, covering the Buffalo Sabres with us. So, again, apologies, but let's jump right into it. Jacob, glad to have you here. First and foremost, Tage Thompson, one of the sneakiest 38 goal scorers in a long time. Do you see him continuing that in the upcoming season, or is he going to kind of regress as the season progresses?
Yeah, so I absolutely think he has that chance to just keep going forwards. If you watch the way he developed and the way that he plays, he's actually a really interesting player. He has this incredible release that he learned almost like overnight, it seemed, especially compared to what he was doing in the previous years. He was stumbling over his own feet. He was fanning on shots. He was trying to toe drag himself into oblivion. And he suddenly figured out how to just fire off a snapshot from just about anywhere, and it goes like a million miles an hour. So having that and developing it and being able to use it, he's only gotten better at it. So I only see him getting even better than he was at it. So as far as a progression and a point standard goes, I think he has a chance to get more points. I think he'll go over the 70-point mark. I don't think he'll quite reach the point per game mark. I think he'll be just under it, maybe about 75 points-ish. But as far as his goal scoring goes, which is what's going to be his real talent, what his real asset to the team is going to be, that's up for debate whether or not he can hit 40. I think he can, and I think he can even go above 40. I really think he has the shot, and I really think he has the skill and the ability that he could shoot for upwards of 45. Maybe not this year, but in the near future, I think he has that potential to be a consistent 38 to about 43 goal scorers, and I think he'll peak at about 45 one year.
I mean, he's a young guy with a heavy shot, so there's a lot of room for improvement there.
Yeah, well, like I said, he's a sneaky 38 goal scorer. I'm looking at his, I'm like, what? This guy, he scored 38?
Yeah, he was very quiet in goal scoring last year.
Yeah, so I mean, he's not going to be. Well, obviously, everyone knows about him now, so we'll see if he can do it. Because, I mean, if he has that shot, it's most of the time. I mean, you're probably going to score those goals. So we'll see how he kind of can do in this next season, and like to progress to maybe a 40-45 goal scorer, which would be amazing for this team moving forward. All right, well, let's talk about a new addition, not in the offseason, but a guy that got in that Jack Eichel trade that finally happened, Alex Tuch. And he didn't start playing with the team until later in the season because of injury, but when he did start playing, he became like instant success, it seemed, and it fit in almost perfectly. So what are your expectations for his first full season in Buffalo? And this is insane, but could you see him getting the captaincy?
Yeah, so Tuch is a really interesting player. He's got a very unique skill set in that he is that leader, but he has that hometown feel to him because he is from the Buffalo area. So he has that drive, he has that desire to want to do something good for this team and for this city, regardless of the fact that he was traded from somewhere else and came here. So that's great. As far as his performance goes, I see him realistically as somewhere around a 60-point player. He's very good at what he does. He's a bit of an agitator. He digs down low in corners. He can score from just about anywhere. He can tip pucks. He can do anything on the power play. He's a decent penalty killer. He's not fantastic, but he's a decent penalty killer. But he can hit that 20 goal, maybe 40 assist mark, and he's going to be the one that's giving room to any of his line mates, whether that's going to be Tage Thompson and Jeff Skinner again, or if it's going to end up being Mittelstadt, maybe Olofsson, or somebody, in that, mid-range, or even one of the rookies and Winner Paterka. That would be fine too. But I see him as more of the setup guy and the one that's going to be taking the beating for his teammates or giving the beating out a little bit more, playing that power forward role. That's more of what he is. As far as him becoming the captain, while a lot of people are thinking about it and talking about it, I don't think he's the choice. I don't think he's going to be not the right fit, but I don't think he's the right overall choice for a captaincy. I think he's important to be included in the leadership group. So maybe slapping an A on his chest for a portion of the year would be fantastic. But I don't see him as the captain for this year or future years, but I do see him as an integral part of the leadership team overall.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, at first I thought Tuch was a fantastic fit right when they made that trade. I actually was like, okay, like Buffalo might have fleeced, Vegas here. So this could turn out really well. And he did fit in right away once he came back from that injury. But I think you're absolutely right, Jacob. I think an A is absolutely appropriate, but I don't see him wearing that C. But crazier things have happened. So, all right, let's continue talking about, some of these veterans. You mentioned one of them, Jeff Skinner. He had a hell of a season last year with 33 goals, and Kyle Okposo had a 21 goal season, which was pretty good for him playing in that bottom six role. So after their bounce back seasons last year, what are your expectations for the veteran duo in 2022-23?
So let's start with Okposo. As far as, since we're on that captaincy topic, if anybody's going to be captain this year, it's going to be Okposo. And that is if the Sabres actually end up naming a specific captain this year. They might not want to for the sake of he has an expiring contract, and they might want to, establish leadership within the team and then eventually pick a long-term one.
Yeah.
But if they're going to pick one for this year, he's absolutely the choice. He's the one that all the young players seem to gravitate to. He's the one that was very clearly the most present on the bench anytime you were watching the game. So he is that guy, and he's the leader that the team has, even if there's not a big C sitting on his chest. And that's perfectly fine. As far as his stats are concerned, I think he's going to go down just a little bit just because of the increased role of some of the rookies like Quinn, Krebs, Peterka, Cozens. All those kids are going to get elevated. They're going to get more ice time. They're going to get more chances. They're going to be scoring a little bit more. So will he hit that 20-goal mark again? Maybe, but I don't really see him being able to get up to that total points number that he was sitting at last year. But I don't think it matters that much. I don't think his point production is really where his value lies. So even if he finishes the year with 10 goals, 10 assists, and he's the best leader that the team could possibly imagine, and everybody seems motivated, and this team is just ridiculous out of the gate and energized, I call that an absolute win as far as what Okposo brings to the team. As far as Jeff Skinner goes, what he did last year is what I consider par for the course for Jeff Skinner. That's what he's supposed to be. He's back to being what he is. He's a goal scorer. He's not flashy, but he has those moments. He's kind of gritty around the net. He gets some tap-ins. He goes for rebounds, and he has that ability to just snipe the puck to any corner that he so chooses. So he's that great utility scorer that they'll be able to use in power play or just standard situations. And he's a great first-line option, especially to sit on Thompson's wing or to put with Tuch, or to even put with Mittelstadt if they need to get him going. I think they can develop chemistry between the two of them. Skinner is a goal scorer at heart. I don't think he'll hit 40 again. I think that was just the product of being on Jack Eichel's wing. And I'm not saying he can't do it. I'm just saying he likely won't do it. I think his realistic goal number is somewhere between 27 to about 33 goals, which he was on the high end of this year. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that's exactly the mark that he should hit and the exact kind of numbers that he should be putting up. And this team should be elated if that's what he's scoring at. Is the $9 million price tag a little high for it? Sure. But for what he brings as far as his personality and his energy to the team, I think you might be willing to pay that little bit extra for the sake of keeping all that camaraderie together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was great to see Skinner kind of bounce back to that because everyone was on him for not scoring. That probably the worst free agent signing and like whatever, but he's come back and he's scoring. Like you say, that's what what he is. He's a goal scorer. So hopefully he can keep doing that for the Sabres' sake for sure. All right, let's talk about a young guy now, and Dylan Cozens. And he had an okay season his sophomore year, 13 goals, but he has a lot more to give. He's been talked about in the captaincy talk as well. Do you see him becoming a top line type centerman this year, or is that still in the cards for the future?
So Cozens is a little interesting, and I think this is his pivotal year. Last year, he had a lot of those moments where you could just tell he was snake bit. He was trying everything. He was getting the chances. He just couldn't quite finish anything off. He wasn't able to, get that last bounce, or he wasn't able to shovel that puck to his teammate at the last second. It was just the small little things that didn't seem to go his way. And I don't really fault him for that. I think his numbers would have been better if the luck was just a little bit more on his side. Now, to that end, I think he's a very skilled player, and I think that he has the potential to be a top-end forward. Do I think he's going to take over the first-line spot from Tage Thompson this year? No, I don't think he has that in him quite yet, but I do think he has the chance to take over the second-line spot from Casey Mittelstadt, especially if he's putting up the points, and especially if he's developing the chemistry with the younger teammates like Quinn, Krebs, or even Peterka, or even Olofsson, if you want to go along that route. If he's getting the chemistry with somebody and the scoring is happening, give him more ice time. Give him that chance. Let him become the player that he's supposed to be, and it'll be so much better for his development. It'll be so much better for the team as a whole, and I think he's poised for his breakout year. I think he can easily hit that 20-goal mark. I think he'll exceed it. I think he might go upwards of 25, but I really see this as his year to prove to himself and to prove to everybody else that he is the player that we were hoping that he was going to be when we drafted him.
Yeah, I think this is a very good opportunity for him this year to really take off. But on the other side of that coin, right, you talked about him just now, is Casey Mittelstadt, and he has a chance to lose that second line center to Dylan Cozens this year. So Mittelstadt is going into his turning 24 in November. Sorry. He's turning 24 in November, which is about the age most players kind of end their development cycle at that 24, 25-year-old year and are starting to reach their peak and then, continuing on from that plateau. So how much pressure is on Mittelstadt this year to perform with not only Cozens knocking on the door, but Jack Quinn and JJ Peterka on the cusp of being full-time NHLers, not to mention the Peyton Krebs and the Yuri Kuliks who are coming along the pipeline as well?
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody who has more pressure on him this year in a Buffalo uniform than Casey Mittelstadt. He's had so much bad luck, again with the bad luck, just with injuries and the timing of everything. He hasn't really had that chance to get himself going. And then as soon as he does get that little bit of momentum going for him during the season, bam, he gets knocked down with another injury. And while that's not completely his fault, it's something that's just really unfortunate. And it's just moving him further and further down the depth chart, especially with all of these young centers that are coming up. You have Cozens, you have Krebs, they both play center. Eventually you'll have Savoy coming up. Eventually you'll have Ostlund wanting to do it. Eventually you'll have Kulik wanting to come up. Like, you have so many different options. Or if anybody watched the Prospects Challenge, I know I did. I went to a bunch of the games. Tyson Kozak came up. He's going to be challenging for an eventual spot with the Sabres, I guess, within the next 3 years. So there's a lot of center depth that the Sabres have amongst their prospects, and Mittelstadt is just finding himself falling and falling and falling. I don't think he's going to be in a Sabres uniform for very much longer. If he is, then it'll maybe be till the end of this year. But regardless of his performance, this is his year to prove something, whether it be to himself or to management. But I don't think that he has a very long future ahead of him in Buffalo.
Yeah, it's fair. The thing is, it's like you said, I don't know why I forgot about him. I love this guy, Matthew Savoy. I forgot he went to Buffalo. He got drafted.
He's been fun to watch.
He's going to be insane,
Yeah.
Matthew Savoy. Jeez, I'm hitting myself now. Why did I forget about him? He's coming up too. So I mean, there's just so much.
A lot of potential in that pipeline in Buffalo.
If you're a young player in this organization, you better get going.
Yeah,
you're gonna be in
It's
trouble.
going to be a war for the center position in like 2 years' time, and it's a matter of who wants it more.
Yeah,
absolutely.
so that's gonna be fun to watch, and especially as they keep progressing, because the Sabres have a heck of a prospect pool, that's for sure. Well, let's talk about now, not the future. And where do you see Buffalo kind of matching up forward wise in this division? Are they still kind of towards the bottom, or are they starting to kind of push their way up?
I don't consider them a bottom rank. I consider them more of a middle of the pack team. They have some personal firepower, but they don't quite have the high end firepower like Florida, Tampa, Toronto. It's tough to beat what the best in the league is offering when you've been sitting at the bottom of the league for the past 11 years. So do I think that they can beat out any of those teams? Not particularly, but I do think they'll be able to pass out. I do think they'll be able to pass some teams like Ottawa. I do think they'll be able to beat Detroit. I do think they'll be able to possibly slightly beat the Bruins. It'll be tough just because they brought back Bergeron. They still have Pastrnak. So the Bruins still have a good amount of firepower up front. Buffalo has a chance to beat that depending on overall performance of the rookies. I think it hinges a lot on them. So I consider them more of a middle of the pack team as far as the forward group goes.
Okay. And I think that's in a stacked Atlantic, stacked Metro. We talk about the East being crazy. Only time all 8 teams hit 100 points in a season and made the playoffs. So yeah, you're climbing a big hill there, no matter what team you are, if you're in the Atlantic. But I think Buffalo certainly has that firepower to be pretty good. All right, well, let's talk defense now, specifically to start with Rasmus Dahlin, who took a huge step forward last season, hitting a career high 53 points. What are your expectations for Dahlin as he hits his 5th season in the NHL?
Yeah, so Dahlin, he took that big step forward and became the number 1 defenseman. He finally got out of that phase where Ralph Kruger just shut him down and tried to turn him into a defensive-minded defenseman and just ruin all of his creativity. Don Granato let him off the leash and said, go, do what you do, be what you are. And as soon as he had that opportunity, he ran with it. He started creating plays. He started dazzling everybody. And he really made a name for himself beyond just being a former number 1 overall pick. Now he is the Sabres' number 1 defenseman. And this year is where he's going to have to prove that he's going to retain that spot, because he has some competition, especially with the high, pedigree that Owen Power brings and the size that he brings and everything that's going to go on with him. But Dahlin, as it sits right now, is the Sabres' best defenseman. He's good defensively. He's not amazing, but he is good. And I think he will improve on his overall defensive play this year. But offensively, I think he'll get better too. I think he'll jump up in his points total. I think his goals will stay about the same, maybe about 12 to 14 goals. And I think his assist numbers will jump, so he'll be sitting somewhere around 60 to about 68 points. And I think he might even be around second on the team in points behind Thompson by the end of the season. I really think he has that potential to jump up more, especially with the knowledge that he is the go-to guy. I know Don Granato has made it very clear to him, based off of his performance, that that's what he is. But it'll be nice to see what it's like when he thinks that he is. Now that he believes that he is the number 1 guy, let's see what he can really come up with.
Yeah, he's an amazing defenseman to watch too. And in the same year that Quinn Hughes was drafted, I know full well what Hughes can bring. So he's a really good defenseman. So I think he will hit that again, probably more. Well, you mentioned Owen Power, so let's talk about him now. And he's entering his first full season. He played a bit at the end of the year. Was okay. Does he have a shot at the Calder this year? I mean, there's a lot of competition, obviously, but what do you expect in his? It's not sophomore, but his rookie season.
Yeah. So again, Power is another one of those make a statement kind of situations. He came in at the end of last year and he had some really good moments. He had a couple of very clearly rookie moments where he got burned. But he had those other really good moments where he didn't do anything too flashy. He was just playing some really good defense. And that's what he's going to be relied upon to do. We don't really know what the defensive pairings are going to be. I personally think he's going to get matched up with another youngster named Samuelson, or I could even see him getting paired with Lyubushkin, who the Sabres signed in free agency. Someone a little bit bigger so that he has that opportunity to use that offensive side that he is able to use. He's not as fancy with the puck and creative as Dahlin. He's a little bit more simplistic in how he does it, but he's a very good puck mover. He can get anything up ice, and he can take the puck up himself and still make a play happen. So maybe having a defensive partner that will, sit back and let him use his offensive instincts and reliably let him create that offense that he is capable of doing will be very important to him. I think he has a shot at the Calder. I think he'll finish about top 3 in voting should he, actually come prepared for the task, and I think he will. He's got a big responsibility on his shoulders because he's likely to be playing top 4 minutes for Buffalo. As long as he's not overworked and he produces somewhere around 35 points, which I think is realistic on the high end for him, I think he's got a shot at being in the running for the Calder. I think he'll finish about top 3 in the votes.
Yeah, I think you're right. If he can kind of play that role, play his game, and not have to have too much pressure on him that first year, and give himself that time. I don't think he has to be a Moritz Seider dragging Danny DeKeyser around the ice on one of the worst teams in the NHL at night in and night out to earn the Calder this year. But it'll be interesting to see what he can do. So you rank the forward group around the middle of the pack in the Atlantic. This defensive core we've talked about is pretty young for the Buffalo Sabres coming into this season. So where does that defense match up with the other teams in this division?
I'm going to sit Buffalo again, just right in that middle of the pack here. They have the youth, but the youth defensemen that they have all have an incredible amount of skill. Maybe not a ridiculous amount of firepower from the back end, but they have some very good overall skill from the back end. They're, again, not stacked up with the likes of Tampa or Toronto or even Florida. Florida took a bit of a hit when they lost Weegar, but that overall Florida defensive core is still pretty darn good.
Yeah.
Tampa Bay still has one of the best defensemen in the entire league, if not arguably the best, depending on your opinion. And Toronto just has a solid overall defensive group. And Buffalo, comparatively to the other teams, are probably close to Detroit in the overall skill level, just because of the way that their youth is. But they're not top, they're not bottom, so I'll sit them kind of towards the middle again.
Yeah, Detroit does have a lot of young defenders as well. Simon Edmondson's coming in this year, who's kind of like an Owen Power / Victor Hedman type player. We already mentioned Moritz Seider. There are a lot of young defensemen in the Atlantic this year, but it makes for a lot of excitement as well.
Yeah, and another guy you mentioned briefly was Lyubushkin, and I'm blanking on why am I blanking on these guys going to Buffalo, but Lyubushkin went there too. But yeah, he's going to be. He's not a super good, great defenseman, but he's good. Physical. He's physical. He can probably pair with a guy like Power and be pretty good too. So it'll be interesting to see how they all kind of do and mesh together this year. All right, well, let's go to goaltending, which is a major issue last year. Not at the beginning. Craig Anderson was really good to start, but then injuries, and he's older too. But now you're coming in with 3 goaltenders that are kind of be fighting their way. So Malcolm Subban, Eric Comrie, and Craig Anderson. So do you see a 1A, 1B, or are they going to carry that 3-man tandem throughout the year?
So as far as Buffalo's goaltending, I don't see Anderson being as a bona fide starter anymore. He got older and he got slower. And you could tell as the year went on that he was getting a little bit more tired and things just weren't up to his personal standard. But he clearly feels that he's good enough to go for another season. So I think he'll be okay. I don't think he'll get the lion's share of the starts. I think that'll fall mostly on Comrie's shoulders.
Mhm.
And ultimately, when either one of them gets injured or if Anderson just doesn't have it in him anymore and he decides, hey, I actually am not up to speed, I'm just going to, take the time and retire, so be it. And Buffalo still has some decent goaltending options. Malcolm Subban is still a very capable goaltender. I don't see any problem with him being in a backup role. I don't see him as a full-blown starter himself either. But if Buffalo's going to give some starts to a young goaltender, they should be giving it to Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen.
Mhm. Yeah.
He showed last year that even though his record wasn't great while he was up with Buffalo, his numbers overall were solid.
Mhm.
He made some key saves. He had some good positioning. He had a couple of rookie moments again, just because he hasn't quite adapted to, the NHL game from the AHL game quite yet. But he's right there. He's close. He just needs that little bit of a jolt to get himself up to speed and actually get into that role. So I think Comrie is the guy to start the year and get most of the starts. But by the end of the year, I wouldn't be surprised to see the final tandem being Subban with Comrie, or even UPL with Comrie.
Yeah, I like Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. I think he was a very fun goaltender to watch. I think he's got a lot of potential. I'd love to see Buffalo build around him more. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think Comrie's going to end up being the kind of the de facto 1A, depending on who he ends up going with.
The thing is, too, the Sabres their goaltending pipeline is pretty good. They got Kevin Levi coming up too, and he's looked really good in NCAA. They've got some good goaltenders coming up, and they'll just have to wait for him, I guess.
Yeah,
I can't wait to see what Levi will do in the next couple of years. He's a little bit smaller, but man, is this guy quick. If you've ever watched him live, watching him on film is one thing. If you've seen him play any games live, he is so fast comparatively to some other goaltenders I've seen. It is nuts. So I'm excited to see what he'll do in his next couple of development years.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's talk about this goaltending and how it matches up with other teams in the Atlantic. We have the offense and defense around the middle of the pack. Do you see this goaltending being toward the middle of the pack, or is there still a lot of question marks there?
No, this one's more of a question mark. This one, Buffalo's goaltending is more towards the lower tier. Comrie he showed that he's capable, but he's not a proven NHL starter yet. Right. So we don't really know how he's going to hold up to a full 82 game season, or how he's going to hold up to 40 plus starts. We know he can play 20 games, and we know he can do solid within those numbers, but the longevity, we're not quite sure yet. Anderson getting older, big question mark there. Subban has a bit of an injury history, so we don't really know what consistency is going to happen there. Even UPL, again, has injury history. So who's Buffalo going to rely on? Are they going to bring Michael Hauser all the way back from the ECHL? And if they do, fine. He put up some solid numbers and records by defying every odd imaginable. But they can't keep doing that every single year. They can't keep dipping into their fifth, sixth string goaltenders just because they ran out. So as far as where Buffalo ranks in the overall goaltending in the Atlantic, they're not going to compete with Tampa. They're definitely not going to compete with Florida. Boston's, I think, is underrated. I think Allmark and Swayman are fantastic duo. Yep. And if they're going to do good this year, it's going to be on the backs of the two of them. So I don't completely count them out just because of their goaltending. And I just don't think Buffalo is anywhere near the top as far as the Atlantic goaltending goes. I'd say bottom two.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, I think so too. So we'll see. That's going to be an interesting one to watch too. All right, Jacob, we're going to go into our quick fire round here. And we're going to throw some questions at you, and you can have one word answers, or you can just do a quick one or two sentences to explain your answer. So
all right.
I'll start. What is the biggest storyline or question mark going into the season for the Buffalo Sabres?
Owen Power.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Who is going to be one or two breakout stars for the Sabres this year?
Dylan Cozens, Peyton Krebs.
Love it.
Oh, those are good ones. All right, one player that needs to bounce back from last season.
Victor Olofsson. His season might have been solid, but he needs to stop having slumps.
Yeah.
Fair. Very fair. Who's going to be the Buffalo Sabres X factor this season?
Tage Thompson.
Yes, for sure. All right, one rookie or prospect that could surprise and make the roster out of training camp.
While not likely, Savoy or Kulik.
I can see Kulik. I can really see Kulik.
Yeah.
I think he's almost ready for the NHL. I think
they both
definitely between the two. I think Kulik for sure.
They're
agree.
Very, very close. And it's going to be a fun battle to watch coming out of that camp too, because they could be that burst of energy the Sabres need, and they might just say, screw it, let's put them in and see what they can do.
Yeah,
they might. That's why I said it's not likely, but if they do, it's going to be one of the two of them.
Yeah.
All right, give us one Sabres player fans should be watching that we have yet to mention on this show.
Matthias Samuelsson.
Okay.
Yeah. He's gonna be interesting to watch. All right, who will lead the team in scoring at forward?
That'll be Tage Thompson.
Yeah, for sure. And on defense,
it's going to be Dahlin by like a mile.
Yeah, you made reference to Dahlin finishing second behind Thompson earlier, and I was like, I already know what his answer is for the quick fire. Yeah,
so Power's not gonna.
The difference in scoring between the top two like scoring defensemen on the Sabres is going to be a difference of like 30 points. It's not even going to be close.
Yeah,
all right.
Well, the only guy that could potentially is Power, but I don't see that.
And if he does, then that's awesome. And
if he does, great, but I don't
for
think
sure we'll be winning the Calder. But
if he throws up 50 plus points, he'll get it. But geez, I don't think he will.
No, I don't see it either. I don't think he's going to be that high of a scoring defenseman. Like you say, he's more that guy. I think he'll probably be that 40. He'll probably hit 50 once in his career, but
he's
probably
about a 40 to 45.
Yeah, he'll probably be around that.
Yeah, that'll be
and that's not bad.
Sure. No.
Nothing to complain about in that. But he'll be a shutdown type D, and he'll have some like really nice overall possession numbers and some great plus minus. So that's more of what his speed's going to be.
Yeah, what did I say? It's not bad. All right. Who? Oh, you're.
Yeah,
up,
sorry. No, go ahead. Is there one
fast.
player that the Sabres could trade before the deadline?
It's Casey Mittelstadt.
I could see that actually.
Yeah,
we could get a pretty good return for him still.
Mm-hmm.
We've been kind of hinting at that.
Yeah. Also,
been leading up to it.
Yeah. All right, this is a fun one. One bold prediction or a hot take season.
Bold prediction: the playoff drought will end.
Ooh, that is bold. I like it.
It's going to take a lot to get it to come together, but it's not impossible.
No.
All right. Well, that kind of leads into this question. Where will the Sabres finish in the standings? And, will they make the playoffs? If so, how will they make the playoffs? Let me ask you that one.
Yeah. So if they're going to make the playoffs, it's going to be on the backs of the young kids, especially on the performances of a player like Quinn or Peterka. Because the two of them jumping up into the lineup, they can't just end up being 20 to 30 point players and calling it a season. If the Sabres are going to make a big splash and actually go forward into the playoffs, they're going to need depth scoring, and they're going to need so many different things to go right. But if those young kids are really jumping up and making a name for themselves, I think that's what's going to be the catalyst to drive them into the playoffs.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Jacob. Loved having you on the show talking Buffalo Sabres. Before we let you go, there's a segment Matt and I do every day on the Hockey Writers podcast, and that's the article of the day. Matt and I are not going to give any today. While we're doing these, because we want to highlight the team writers that we are focusing on. So you can pick one from the Buffalo Sabres writing team. It can be your own, but give us one article featuring the Buffalo Sabres that you would like to highlight today.
So I picked my most recent one that I did, which was the Sabres top 10 prospects for 22-23 season. And I had a couple of what some people might consider off the board picks, especially comparatively to the hype around some of the other ones. And some of my other picks were a little bit predictable. I can go down the whole list if you want, or I can just give you the full ranking if you'd like, or I could just tell you the player names.
Give us
sample it.
Yeah, give us 2 or 3 samples to tease, and then make them go read it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have Matt Lindgren, the Sabres' recent 4th round pick, sitting at 10. He was the first one I talked about. I kind of went over his, basic repertoire, what he's good at and what he needs to work on. He's a little bit of ways away, but he's, in my opinion, their 10th best prospect that they have because of how high his potential is and how good he can potentially be. So I think he passes some other forward prospects that could be in that spot just because of his talent level alone.
All right.
Oh, Matt Lindgren. I have no idea how he dropped that far. I have no idea.
I'm cool with
Buffalo is, I was like I say, they're not questioning.
Fine for Buffalo, but I have no idea why he dropped so.
Yeah.
We don't ask those questions. We just take them and run away.
I had him ranked in like the 3rd round, I think.
I saw a lot of projections having him go in like
actually.
the high 3rd round.
Yeah.
Pretty sure I had him closer to the end of the 2nd.
Yeah. Speaking of late round picks, at number 6, one of my off the board picks, I have Tyson Kozak, which was the Sabres' 7th round pick last year. He had such a great development year, especially comparative to what he was putting up in numbers and his just overall play. You can see the difference visually in what he was doing last year and what he was doing this year. So I also, like I mentioned, attended the Sabres Prospect Challenge tournament. So I got to see him live and in action. There is a night and day difference between what he was and what he is. So I genuinely think he even has a chance to make the Rochester Americans roster. I don't think he'll push for a Sabres spot, but I wouldn't be completely shocked if he ended up getting a call up once or twice throughout the year because of what he does bring to the table. He's a great 2-way center. He can be put in any situation. He's not super fast, but he's just a reliable overall player. And he's a little bit stocky for his size, so he's got that physicality to him. And I think he's just a great underdog pick. And I'm glad they chose such a reliable player for the 7th round and are getting so much out of him so early.
Yeah, it's always great to see when your team's, scouting department can hit on those late round selections, because that can make a huge difference, especially in later years as you start, getting through rebuilds and starting to make playoff pushes once again.
Yeah. Well, if you've watched any Prospect Corner, I love the late round picks. So,
well, Jacob, thank you once again for joining us today. That's going to do it for our Buffalo Sabres edition of the NHL 2022-23 preview shows. Make sure you are following along with Jacob Strozyk this season and the other Buffalo Sabres writers as they continue their coverage throughout this season. Also, make sure you're following along, subscribing, liking our channel down here on YouTube. We are putting out these shows almost once a day as we head into the regular season. So follow along as our series continues. Check out our other show. We just had a great interview on Monday with Brock McGillis talking about Hockey Canada and inclusion within our favorite sport on this earth. So check that out. Also, make sure you are signing up for the Morning Skate newsletter, a free newsletter that's delivered to your inbox Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. It will be back to Monday through Friday once the season starts. And that is brought to you for free by the hockey writers at morningskate.io. That's going to do it for this edition of the Hockey Writers Podcast. We'll see you next time.